Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Unafraid podcast. And once again, this is like twice in the last month, which is pretty exciting. You actually get a video as well if you're on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you are. Yes, so you get to see our lovely faces, which is pretty exciting. I'm Jay, of course. You've known me for a little while now, and I will introduce our guest shortly here. Before I do, I want to give a big shout out to the show's sponsor, Rebecca Jonesy, author of fantasy and adventure and very good steamy erotic stuff. But you got to make sure you're like hiding under your bed covers, and it's just a good time. But Rebecca is a fierce ally and a wonderful friend, and I really appreciate her supporting the show. So definitely check her books out. Link to her website is going to be right in the episode description. So thank you again, Rebecca. I really appreciate it. Let's see what else. Oh, I wanted to show you guys something. I told you of the last couple shows that we purchased an embroidery machine just for kind of making fun little goods around the house, and we're finally starting to learn how to use it. Spoiler alert: there is a learning curve when you're dealing with embroidery machines. It's not that easy, but one of the
Uh,
one
I'm
of our
laughing. I'm laughing out of turn, but it's so true.
no, it is. It is. There's a learning curve with all of these things, but this was our very first patch that we made for a little Etsy store, little Queers for Black Lives Matter patch, and yeah, so it's fun. We're having a good time. We get to be creative, and we're telling ourselves that it's a business. That way, we could justify doing all this crap. So,
Oh
so
no, that's my whole life.
yeah, yeah,
Welcome.
right. Hey, I've gotten through 41 years like this, so I mean, it can happen. You can make it happen. All right, our guest today is the incredible Bre Poisonne. How are you doing, Bre?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. We had a lovely chat before we started recording about how shit the COVID situation is in Ontario right now, and you're still stuck there.
We had to get it out of the way because I was like, look, let's not talk about this on the podcast because this is awful and nobody is ever going to want to listen to this again. So let's not record that part
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know
because
what?
I'm in Toronto.
We we've been living through the crap. We don't wanna hear about the crap anymore. We just
Mm-mm.
wanna move on and think about good stuff, right?
Yeah, it would be so nice. It would
Or
be so nice for everything to just work. It's been a year. We've done it. We've lived through history because I feel like early on there was this sense of like, oh, we're living through history. This is going
yeah,
to be important.
yeah,
And now it's gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm done with living through history. I hate living through history.
yeah.
Let's
I don't
finish. I'm
I don't
done.
want
Thank you.
any more history. No, thank
No,
you. No.
no
Well,
more history in my life. That's it. I did my part.
well,
And the
we did
next
it.
generation can have it. We're done.
Well I figure my wife and I really love watching, kind of the old documentaries about, medical stuff, and we watched one on the
Mhm.
the 1918, the Great Influenza, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Wow, we're living this right now."
It's the
It's so
exact
wild.
same thing. They had the same mask problems, they
Yeah.
had everything, and I didn't realize that. I've never looked up
Um,
that particular pandemic. I did a lot of history in
uh,
school, but it was never American history specifically.
yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah, no, I was just like, "Oh."
yeah, most Americans don't know American history, so don't
To be
romanticize it.
fair, I'm Canadian, and I didn't do Canadian history either, I did European history, so
Nice. Well, European history was always my favorite, legitimately was my favorite because there's so many fascinating things that happened throughout the centuries, and
it's so
I
much
think
longer.
yes, yes, we're so young over here, we haven't had as
Yeah.
many terrible things happen,
We're a
but,
tiny baby country, like, both of us are tiny baby countries, and if
yep,
you wanted to get into ancient history, you couldn't do these countries because
yep.
we just murdered all of the history when we got here,
Exactly,
and
we
it's
got here,
awful.
killed
Yep.
everyone, and took over, and I was like, "Oh, our history is white history."
It's
Yeah,
terrible, it's
yeah, okay.
terrible. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and guys, I mean, you've been listening to me for a long time, you know I'm not making light of the suffering that we've inflicted on many, many, many people. It's
No,
just
we're
it's
honestly, we're just at the point of pandemic
yeah,
now where you
yeah,
have to laugh at everything, I think, otherwise, what are you doing?
that's yeah. Well, okay, so off the pandemic now,
Yeah,
we gave
let's
that
stop being real like that, that's
yeah, we gave that 3 minutes, okay? I feel like that's enough for fricking COVID. You've had your spotlight here. So, on your website, the very first words on your website, right under, poison, of course,
Mhm.
is non-binary babe, professional cosplayer. So
Yep.
tell me about being non-binary babe.
It's been interesting. It's kind of been a last few years thing. I'm sure this isn't, this isn't something new to anyone who's gone through any of this sort of thing. But a few years ago, I started cosplaying male characters. I was born female, right? Lived most of my life as a woman. And then a couple years ago started cosplaying men, which was not something that I had ever done before, and just very, very suddenly was like, that's it. I only want to cosplay boys. I love cosplaying boys. That's it. I'm having a great time. I think it was Noctis from Final Fantasy 15 was the first boy that I had cosplayed. And one of my friends was just like, oh yeah, that feeling when you're trans, huh? And I was just like, no, which I'm sure happens to absolutely everyone. And now here I am, like 3 years later, being like, hey man, I'm sorry about that, because surprise, they were right. So I don't particularly strongly feel male or female unless I'm in a very particularly male or female character. Anyone who's watching the video of this is like, hey, what up, 12-year-old boy? Because like this is just what I look like in my day-to-day life, right? I have short hair, I'm pretty nondescriptly like agender. And that's pretty much how I feel the most comfortable, unless I am in a very particular character. Um,
That
but
makes
I shoot sexy content of both.
well, and your look and the way you describe yourself is very, very similar to my youngest, who also identifies as non-binary or genderqueer. And there's three of us in my house who do, and so we're a hot mess. But they really like that. Not really androgynous. It's just they wear what they want. Sometimes they're wearing a skirt. Sometimes they're wearing pants, and it's just
Depends on the day.
yeah, and they just don't really want to be gendered at all, you
Yeah,
know? And so
yeah.
and
Feels
yeah,
it feels better to not be gendered, because I don't feel like I've ever particularly identified with one. I was saying before we started that like I'm not a person who really ever like corrects someone. I do have friends who are non-binary who do correct people to they them pronouns. I
yeah.
don't particularly feel strongly enough to correct people necessarily, but I do get like the warm fuzzy feels when people get it right.
Yeah, well, and okay, and guys, I am very aware that there are many, 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 and more maybe every day, neo pronouns out there, and many of which that I haven't learned yet. But in my experience, the pronoun issues in my house are they them. Like I said, there are a few of us theys in my house, and it just causes all sorts of problems for people. And
It really
what
does.
yeah, why is it that the they them pronouns, why do you think it causes so many problems? Why do people have such a tough time wrapping their head around it?
It's interesting too, because I tend to linguistically, I realize, at least for English, because there are plenty of languages where things are gendered, right? French, like sweaters are female for some reason. In chemise, like I don't know why.
Obviously.
Yeah, man, all sweaters are just female in French. So that does happen sometimes in languages. But I know in English, I almost always default to they, them pronouns for like almost everyone, unless I'm very consciously thinking about it. And I don't think that's a new thing for me necessarily. I think I've kind of always done that. So it does surprise me when people have issues with it. But the biggest one I found is, I guess, people who've never experienced that sort of thing before, having issues where they're like, oh, so you identify as a chair? Like they think they're being funny, right? And I'm like,
Yeah. That makes me
have you ever referred to your chair as they? Like that's linguistically incorrect, really. Um, so it always it's interesting to me.
yeah, and there there's someone I used to work with, and the funny thing is he's actually a really, really sweet kid, and, always trying to be nice to people, and he wasn't talking to me specifically, and he said something, "Well, I identify as a attack helicopter." And I didn't catch the rest of the context of the story, but I just said to him, I said, "Hey, I know it's kind of a funny thing to you, but it's really hurtful to some people. It's not something you should say out loud." And he just kind of shrugged it off and went about his business. But that is something that I think people sometimes say without realizing just how deep it can cut, you know?
Yeah, people who have never experienced being confused about your gender or other people being confused about your gender and how hurtful people can be when they are confused, especially while they're stuck inside during a pandemic and everyone is bored, right?
Yeah.
It's a very easy throwaway line to be like, haha, well, I'm a potato today, right?
Mhm.
But there are plenty of people who I mean, to
Uh,
be fair, some days I feel like a potato,
I was gonna
especially
say, I'm a
recently.
frickin' potato, okay?
I feel like a potato recently because I don't leave my house. I've put down roots and everything. But it's very easy to make that into a joke and a throwaway line when it's never been hurtful to you and you don't
Mm,
understand how it can be because it does sound silly.
yeah. It
It really it does.
it does, and I think that the more the more people are open to understand and be educated about it, the better off we'll all be. Because I think once you understand, then you get to make a choice. Am I going to make this joke anyway because I'm kind of a dickhead, or
Mhm.
am I just going to choose not to because now I know it actually hurts other people? And I think that for the most part, I'm hoping the world is full of fairly good people that make good choices once they understand. But of course, that's
And I hope that even when people respond defensively, that it's them being horrified, kind of that their thing
mm,
that they didn't anticipate to go this way has gone this way. And I always just hope that they're worried about that and now feeling defensive because they didn't mean to do it.
yeah.
And then eventually they will come around. And I do find that that is primarily the case.
Well, that's
Um,
good.
but I'm also not a person. Yeah, I'm one of those people who I don't go to bat like that
Mm,
necessarily, right? It's not necessarily my job to sit someone down on the internet who's having a great time.
that's right. Yep.
Who's having a great time being like, "Oh, so are you a chair?" Um, I'm not one of those people who goes into that fight.
Yep. There
And
are
I really admire people who are, but
but it
I'm baby and I've never been that human being.
no, and you don't have to, and there are plenty of amazing people that are out there fighting that fight
And I
actively, and I
really do admire that. Like,
yeah,
that
and
is amazing.
but let's be honest. Fighting with people on the internet usually doesn't get you the result you want. I think that
It's awful.
educating people in the classroom and via lectures and things like that, that's where we're gonna start to see social change down the road. Fighting with dudes on the internet, it's no, just don't.
It's
You're
never
gonna
gone well for me.
it's just gonna stress you out. Don't do it.
Yeah, it's
So
not good. I do have some friends who that sort of thing, like, they were like, "All right, I had a nice afternoon fighting with people on the internet," and I'm just always like,
yeah, right.
"Good job." Like, I respect that. I don't understand it, but I am happy for you and I am here for you.
So what is it like being because I don't wanna call you a celebrity. I'll call you a I mean, you're kind of like a
I have a moderate following on
yeah,
the internet.
you're a public figure, but people don't like it when they're called celebrities for some reason. So I mean, you're a public figure and an openly queer public figure, and NB. What is that like for you? Has your gender identity had any kind of effect on your professional life?
It definitely does. For people who are unfamiliar, I sell sexy cosplay content on the internet. It's either sex work or sex work adjacent, depending on how you feel about it. I don't have
Sorry.
particularly
I
strong
I
feelings.
forgot to do my job there at the beginning of the
Oh,
show,
it's
and
okay. No, it's totally fine. I don't have particularly strong feelings one way or another about it because I'm also non-binary and pan, so I've never made up a decision in my life ever. So you can't ask me anything. So I do sell sexy cosplay content, and I have found that since I've been kind of like out on the internet as non-binary, people do request like more male characters, more stuff like that. Like this month I was doing Nier Automata, if you're familiar at all, right? So there's 2B from Nier Automata, who's like the main female, but there's also 9S, who is her counterpart, who's male. So I just did both of them. Which is fun because basically all of my tweets are now just like, get yourself someone who does both, and then photos of a male and female character, and then that's it. I've done my marketing, and then I can log back off, which is great in the middle of a pandemic. But yeah, no, since I've been out more, yeah, I have been finding that people are like requesting the male characters, which are generally my favorite to do anyway. So bonus to me. I love that. I love that journey for me. It's great. Um, Although I am realizing, I'm like, I wonder if this is going to be a coming out for people who just don't read, because I realized that I've spent the past like 2 weeks just tweeting about fictional men. And a lot of my characters are female, and if people like have looked at just like specific things, I could totally come across as like femme and cis and straight, because I've been tweeting about like men from the Yakuza game series for like 3 weeks at this point.
Well,
The
you know,
surprise.
yeah, and I've been through your website, and it's poison.com, only spelled as you see it on the screen, and I'll have a link to that in the episode description for those of you who aren't actually looking at the screen. Sorry, podcasters, you're missing out today. But in the website's beautiful, and
Oh,
I
thank
can
you.
see exactly what you mean, because a lot of them do have a very, very strong femme vibe to it. But they're all gorgeous.
Thank you.
The female cosplays, the male cosplays, absolutely gorgeous. And I don't know much about anime and gaming. My kids love it, and my youngest is obsessed with anime, and I've been helping to try to make them some cosplay outfits and stuff like that, so they can have fun with it.
Oh, I love that.
But so they're always showing me these different characters, and I'll tell you what, because they love the female characters, and I think that that's where their first love was. But lately, more and more, it's the more feminine looking male characters that they
Yep.
really dig, the really beautiful male characters, and yeah,
Almost all of my boys, let me tell you, have way more makeup on my face than the girls.
uh,
Almost all of them. Like, I don't know how it wound up that way. Whatever this trend is with just like beautiful men
yeah.
in video games and anime, I'm so here for it. I love it so much.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's like the peacock syndrome. Now
Hmm.
we're finally becoming beautiful. And I think that's a cool thing. And
I mean,
I
high heels were originally for men. They were eventually
really
adopted by women, but yeah, originally only men wore high heels when they were first introduced, and it was a mark of status. They weren't stilettos necessarily, but you would wear like heels and
oh, like with the
platforms.
buckle on the top of them, and
Yep, yep,
okay, oh
like
yeah, yeah,
ye olde
yep.
high heel, right? Yeah, I went to school for fashion design, and I never get to talk about any of that. I did multiple years of fashion history, so
That's
it's all in
cool.
there still somewhere.
No, and and we're gonna get off of the queer topic here for a minute, guys, and I'm sorry. I hope you don't mind, because I want to ask about cosplay stuff, since I am an aspiring, well, everything you could aspire to. I try to do, but
Little bit of everything. I love
yes,
it.
yes, with your cosplays, and people who are listening and watching, when Bree says they have sexy cosplay pics up, we're not talking about the kind of sexy cosplay pics that you might take in your bathroom at home. These are legit shit up on that
Thank
side.
you.
I mean, it is very, very, very good. Everything from the design to the modeling to the photography is all top notch. And I
Thank
married a
you.
photographer, so I'm very, very picky about that kind of stuff. Um,
Oh, my photographer friends, the ones that I work with, 3 or 4 photographers on a regular basis, and then myself, especially because of the pandemic, right? So kind of recently I've been doing all of it. So I
yeah.
really appreciate that.
No, you're welcome. No, it really is fabulous. But what I was going to ask is construction of these costumes. Are you hiring a lot of that out, or are you doing a lot of the construction yourself?
Historically, I have done most of it myself, because that's what my degree was in. I did fashion design as a degree, which I wouldn't recommend, by the way. Um, I learned a lot, but I was also in a lot of debt for a while, and it's not exactly a job-rich program when you get out of it. I worked in movies for a few years, which was good, but if you would like to also have a social life, it's not fantastic. So I did work in movies for a few years, and then I worked very specifically in latex for a few years, which is one of my fortes. I do like latex and chainmail, and basically anything that's not sewing is kind of my forte. But historically, I have done a lot of it myself. I now that I've been in it for a while, have a few people that are really, really excellent, really good at hitting deadlines, which is a huge thing for me, and not a huge thing for a lot of people in the cosplay community. I love you guys. You suck at getting things done on time. I'm sorry. It's just, it is what it is. Um, and I have also started during the pandemic, especially because it's been quite difficult to get a hold of fabric where I am. Almost all of the fabric stores, with the exception of like one large chain, which is not Joann's. We don't have Joann's in Canada, and I miss it. Um, they've all basically been closed for a lot of the pandemic or appointment only. And they're quite hard to get a hold of. And it's hard for me to get there as well. As someone who doesn't have a car, lives like downtown in a city, it's, a couple of hours walk with a bolt of fabric really sucks. So I've been doing less of that recently and a little more of purchasing costumes, pulling them apart when they get here, and kind of retailoring them. Which is something relatively new for me, but is it's a great resource, especially for people who are starting out. There are definitely companies that make cosplay now. They make it affordably. They make good cosplays, and you can either get them custom tailored by the company, or you can tailor them yourself when you get here. And that's also quite a good way to learn how to sew if you're not 100% up on sewing. If you're just kind of trying to teach yourself, because the act of like taking it apart and looking it will
Mhm.
also show you how it was made.
Yeah, well, and for those of you who have never tried and are thinking about trying, um, buying a fabric pattern, that's hard. I mean,
It's
it's like
difficult.
rocket science. It really is. It's difficult the first time you do it, and the first time I did it was for a dress for my youngest for a cosplay from, Danganronpa, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm,
A
mm-hmm.
sage green dress, big red bow,
Yep.
um and I wanted to die trying to follow this damn pattern. So
It's
halfway through, I was
tough.
like, I know what this dress is supposed to look like. I have the correct color. I know the size. I'm just gonna start sewing, and it all came together fine. I'm like, okay. But I
Yep.
believe that it works that way for a lot of different things. There are some arts that are very technical, and some parts of sewing are very technical. But I think that if you can read and learn what you need to know and then kind of do what's going to work best for you. I mean, don't think that you're going to sew like Bre, the first time you try to sew, you'll
Oh yeah,
probably sew more like me, and that's okay. You've got to work up to it.
I think I have about 20 years of sewing experience at
Mhm,
this
mhm.
point. Like my mom sewed when I was young and taught me how to sew like pillows and things at a pretty young age. And then it got tired of me in my teens being like, I want to do this costume. I was like, well, then you can do it yourself. So that's when that started. Um,
Nice.
and I
Just
look back on that old stuff now, and I go, which
mhm.
you just do. I
Yeah.
mean, I look back at things from 5 years ago at this point, because I've been cosplaying for a very long time at this point, probably like 12 or 15 years. And I just look back at stuff from 5 years ago and I go, time to retire that. Like, let's never look at that piece again. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
so
and like
you're always learning.
and that's the big thing, just about any kind of art is we're always we're always growing and learning and hopefully getting better. And I look back at the first book I wrote, and I was like, wow, I made a lot of silly errors. I love the story, but I really could have done a lot of things differently. And so now when I write, I'm like, okay, well, I have all that in the back of my head, and doesn't mean I'm not going to make new dumb errors, but at least you're moving forward, and I think that's important. And
Well, and
you're
that's the learning curve, right?
yeah,
Like you start off and you're like, "Wow, I'm incredible," because you have no idea what you don't know.
yeah,
And then 10 years down the line, you suddenly realize that you know nothing.
yep, yep,
And you will always be learning, and that's kind of the beauty of it. And
yeah,
I feel very lucky in a lot of respects. There are a lot of things that I don't like about being a professional cosplayer, especially during a pandemic. A lot of things are very difficult. But I feel very lucky all of the time to be able to do this all the time, because I do remember times in my life where I was like working two jobs and
mhm,
didn't get to do this almost at all. So I do feel incredibly lucky now.
yeah. Well, and I think that's a great segue into talking a little bit about this. Professional cosplayer. Now, I'm going to tell you that a few years ago, I had only the vaguest idea. Maybe this was more like 5, 6 years ago. Vaguest idea of what cosplay was, and that was because there was an episode of a cartoon called Archer,
Mhm,
which is the
mhm.
guy with the voice of Bob's Burgers, and in it, one of the characters said cosplay enthusiast, and I was like, I have no idea what this is, and so we
I
looked it up.
actually
We're like,
watched all of Archer. Sorry to interrupt you. I watched
no,
all of Archer over the pandemic.
nice, nice,
So I'm just like, "Oh."
yeah. Who would
Yeah,
want to wear an on fire suit?
cosplay
Cosplay,
enthusiast.
yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
yes.
That was
Okay.
one
Oh,
of
good.
the
So,
moments where I paused it just so I could
yep,
laugh. Yep.
yep. Good. I'm glad we're on the same page here. So you know what I'm talking
We
about.
really are.
But so I didn't have any idea what it was. So we looked it up. My wife and I were like, oh, okay, it's playing dress up. And then we started actually going to Comic Cons because for my other show, Spilling Ink, I interview a lot of writers and a lot of different creatives and things like that. So I would go to Comic Cons and I see all this vibrant, incredible cosplayers. I'm like, oh,
Yep.
this is what cosplaying is. It's not just dressing up for Halloween. This is a whole nother ball game.
It's a
Yeah.
whole nother thing, and when I first got into it, so I mean, I'm 29 now, and when I first got into cosplay, I think I was probably, like, 15, and it is an entirely different animal. Like, back in the day, you'd buy a wig, they came in 12 colors, they were awful, they were, like, Party City quality, like, super shiny, don't look like real hair at all wigs, and you would get the wig that was available in like really short, like my hair right now, right? Like boy cut short, bob length at your shoulder, and then like boob length kind of, or long. Like, and that was it. You could get them straight or curly, and we were happy with it and we loved it because it was a blue wig, right? And you got them off of sketchy stores on eBay, and that was like it. And now I have favorite companies, and I have companies that I don't buy from because I don't like the quality of their fibers when I cut them. Right? Like this is this is the kind of spoiled for choice that we are now. And it's been incredible to watch that industry grow from something that literally nobody knew about. And it was just my like weirdo friends in a tiny town in southern Ontario being like, we love Resident Evil 4, right? And like doing that in our backyard, to this thing now where Comic Con sells out faster than sports games, right? Like it's from the sports ball, right? You can tell that I that I like sports.
That's
Um,
good too.
yeah, I'm just like, I love when they hit the baseball into the home run.
And yeah, try getting tickets to a big Comic-Con in a big city without press passes. You can't do
Hmm.
it. It's just they
Nope,
sell out so damn fast. That's why
they
I'm
sell
just
so fast.
I'll flash those damn media credentials anytime I can, damn it. Like, I'm
I've
getting in.
definitely I've been to more than one, like, without a ticket and just not gone inside because I don't have a ticket to get inside, just gone to all of the, like, renegade stuff that pops up
Like,
around the convention because of all the other people that can't get in.
well,
Yep.
it's a whole culture. I mean, it's an incredible, it really is. Well, and so, gosh, back to where I was going with this. I was going somewhere.
Sorry.
No, no, it's all good. I got myself off track, I think, but,
We
you know,
just got so
it's
excited about Comic-Con.
yes, they're fun. God, I miss them so much.
I really miss them.
Yeah. But so to be a professional cosplayer, that's kind of a whole nother ball game because you're not dressing up to show your fandom and to rep your favorite characters at a Comic Con. You may be doing that also, but you're also doing this as your income, and that is a huge that is a huge step, I think, for most people. And to me, I feel like that would require one real talent with costume making, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're buying it from talented people, talent as a model, and also I'm sorry, society, but this is the way we are, being a really good looking person. I think that those are kind of three things that are really necessary. And I couldn't figure out at first how you really make money doing that and
That's
until
fair.
yeah, well, until I really dug into your site a little bit, and I see it's structured a lot like a Patreon or an OnlyFans or any of these type of sites would be, where you have different tiers from $2 on up to $500 a month, that people can sponsor you and buy your work. And I
Mhm.
think that that's a really cool idea. How long have you been doing this as a professional?
Full time, I think. The last year never happened in my brain. It's the community-esque,
Okay,
like,
we
gas
can skip
leak
that.
year, so I'm trying to do the math, thinking about that. I think I think it's been about 2.5 years full time where this is the only thing that I do. And then I have on the side been doing it for about 4, but I have been cosplaying since I was a teenager. So I really already had most of the skills that I took going into this from, being on the internet and having, like a few thousand followers and kind of figuring out how to interact with that, to and going to school for costume design and doing all of my internships for that and everything, which really taught me, how to do so much at once. That's probably the one thing that I will give my schooling for having taught me was it made you do way too many things at once and kind of figure out how to prioritize doing that to my own detriment most of the time, to be honest with you, but that's how it goes as a self-employed person, really. They tell you, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, and it's actually the exact opposite because you will never know how to stop. And then you just think,
Yep. Yep,
yep.
they say for writers, it's, teach someone to write and they'll be miserable every day of their life or something like that. Well,
I believe it.
we're not
I have friends who are
miserable.
writers.
Yeah, but it's a shitload of work, doing I mean,
It's a lot of work.
yeah, creating art for fun, I think, is the best thing ever. It's so great. And then
And
this
kind of the problem with, like,
yeah,
monetizing some of your content is then your brain starts to work that way.
yep,
And you just think like, "Oh, here's this other thing I'm doing. How can I do that?"
mhm,
Right? Like, "How can I monetize this? How can I do this?" And suddenly you just don't have hobbies anymore, and
yeah,
you only have work.
and
And
I think
then it's a
yeah,
pandemic and you can't go anywhere either, and suddenly there's only work.
yeah.
I
Well, and
mean,
I think that for some people, some personalities, that works really, really well. That they can take the things that they love and make them their businesses. And for others, it doesn't work that well. For me, it's been a challenge because my main art was always writing, and
mhm,
I sell books. I do okay with that, but I don't love writing like I used to because when I'm writing, I'm always thinking about the publisher or the readers or the
mhm.
marketing or this and that, and, there are some authors that can do that, and then they write amazing stories, and they sell millions of copies, and they're very happy. Some of us are just built a little different, and I think that, it's important to remember that we are all different, we're all individuals, of course, we should know that, but definitely not to try to hold yourself up next to someone else. You know, if I was going to go out and start cosplaying, I would never hold myself up next to Bre because I wouldn't like what I saw. But I can still go out and I can still put my heart into making a cool cosplay and have fun, you know?
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of, a lot of people, especially with, we're living through like end stage capitalism at this
Mm.
point, everybody, right? Like, and a pandemic, and things are hard. And I know that a lot of people do look at their like side hustle now to make ends meet, and that's become a very normalized
Mhm.
concept. And I get it because I did that for years. Um, and it's kind of it's both good and bad because it's exciting to see people be able to make money doing the things that they love. But it's difficult, I know, for me, um to take this thing that I really like doing and then have to apply, business and marketing and everything to it, because it is no longer like you thinking about the publisher, right? It's no longer just like, oh, I love this thing, I'm going to do this thing. You now have to be like, okay, here's the character, at least for me, right? Like, here's the character. Am I going to do a good job at this? Am I confident enough that I'm going to do a good job at this to then put all of this time and effort into it? Because if it doesn't work out well, then what do I do for content in July, which is like, it's a thing that is always going to be in the back of your head, and it is this extra level of stress constantly to it, which does take some of the enjoyment out of it. And you have to be careful to keep doing things for yourself so that you don't forget why you loved it in the first place.
Yeah.
Which can be very difficult when it is human nature to look at everyone else and where they are in their journey and what they're doing. And to say like, like I think my work is up to par with that. Like, why is my work not getting that kind of recognition or popularity? And I think that's a very normal thing, and I honestly think almost everyone does it. Um, and it's really important to be able to take a step back from that, because to be totally honest with you, a lot of it is luck. A
Mhm.
lot of people get, you can be very, very good at your craft and not good at social media or unlucky on social media very easily. I've had to learn a lot of things about social media just kind of on the run. It's still not my favorite thing to do, and I don't particularly feel very good at it a lot of the time. And I have friends who are very, very good at social media, and that's kind of their forte. And it's very easy to just look at that and be like, wow, I'm a failure. Like, why can't I do that? And I think that's very human.
Yeah.
So I have to keep reminding myself, that I'm doing well, and I'm doing better than I ever anticipated doing.
Mhm.
And that's good, because it's very easy to just look at other people who are doing better and be like, well, I'll never be that good. But if I look at myself 5 years ago, I didn't ever think I would be this good either.
Yeah.
So you
That's a
just
good
have to
yeah.
keep going.
That's a really good point. Well, and you said something earlier about, sex work or sex work
Mhm.
adjacent, and now we're talking about, side hustles and for you, your full-time job, and you're a professional cosplayer. However, you really make a point to make every photo just as gorgeous as possible, and a lot of them are super, super sexy, and I've only seen your main site. I haven't
You've only
seen
seen the
anything
free
besides that,
stuff.
so, all the free stuff, and some of it, it's so provocative, and it's amazing, it's phenomenal,
Thank you.
and I think that that's gotta be another thing that you're probably always thinking of when you're creating your art is that now I'm creating this art, but I also have to sell this art, and
Mhm.
what do the fans really want to see? Um,
To a certain extent, the old adage is true to a certain extent that sex sells.
mhm,
And we have always said that for a reason, and it's because it's true. But it's also not. I see a lot of people thinking that that's kind of a cop out or a sellout or just an easy way of getting attention, right? It's like, oh yeah, well, you're hot and naked on the internet. It must be nice to work for like 3 minutes a week, right? And people don't see that, there's there's the, like, I don't have any makeup on right now, but like generally you have to have like, there's a full face of makeup that's taken 45 minutes to an hour. And then I had to style this wig, which is up to sometimes like if I had to, you can weft wigs, which is like sewing additional hair into a wig, which is a hand sewing project. And then cutting them and styling them. Like I have wigs that have to live on wig heads full time. I actually have one right here since we're on video, right? They have to like live on wig heads full time because like they're
Oh,
can never that can never go away.
sorry, sorry. I blanked you out there because I was trying to make your screen bigger. That is holy smokes!
Yeah, so his spikes are a little messy right now because I was actually wearing them on a stream the other day. But
Wow.
you know, there are wigs that like I have sewn things into and cut and everything that took days to weeks depending on what I was learning at the time because I was never a hairstylist. So you know, when you're looking, and some cosplays are weeks, like hundreds of hours of work, right? So when you're looking at things, even like the sexy stuff where I'm only wearing like a pair of gloves, like how long did those gloves take to make
Mhm.
is the question. And it's a thing that a lot of people don't realize when they're looking at sexy stuff, is that sometimes I'm wearing like thousands and thousands of dollars worth of time, right? Like if I'm paying myself for some of this, like 2B is one of the things that I'm posting right now, and she's a full latex bodysuit.
Mhm.
um and I recently just like pulled a bunch of things off of her and like remade them and made it better. And sometimes people ask me, they're just like, oh yeah, could you make one of those for me? And I'm just like, no, like you literally could not pay me enough to ever do that cosplay again because I've been working on her on and off for 3.5 years.
Mm.
That's so much time. And it's like, yes, it's a sexy photo, and I take a lot of pride in making like well done
Mhm.
sexy photos. um because I like looking at that, right? Like when I look at art a lot of times on the internet, if I'm looking at like anime art, like I want to see the characters kiss. I
Mhm.
love that. So that's kind of what I've always wanted to do with them because I don't really draw
Well,
or write really. So
people
I
have
had to
this
do it with me.
people have this weird idea that sexy or because sex sells, it somehow makes it less of art, and it really doesn't. There's absolutely nothing wrong with sex.
Art has always been sex. It's either been sex
Yeah.
or the church, and sometimes both. Like I
Yeah.
had to
Well,
take
yeah.
like 4 years of art history, right? So I'm
Well,
there.
but
And yeah.
yeah. No, I really admire your work. I think it's absolutely fabulous. I think what was the one that stopped me in my tracks? It was you may hate this comparison, and I apologize, but, have you ever seen any of the Borat movies?
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, okay, you remember, the thong he wears with the 2 straps?
Yep.
I
Yep.
think you have one with a much cuter outfit than that, but that's the one that stopped me in my tracks. I was like,
Black and
"Holy
white.
cow, yeah." It was
Okay,
it
that
was
was when I dressed up as my PlayStation 5.
no, nice, nice.
When the PlayStation 5 first came out, I happened to be able to get one. I was literally on a website when they went into stock. So I
Oh,
happened to purchase a
nice.
PlayStation 5. And then when I got it like a week later, it was one of those things where I was like, I'm not did I get that? Like I saw it go through on my credit card and I was just like waiting for it to get canceled because we were in that stage. It was the first release of the PlayStation 5. And then it got here and I was just like, "Oh, I actually got a PlayStation 5." And I got really excited and I like made a wig. It's a white wig with like a black stripe down the center of it. And I made a wig and then I like made the whole outfit. It's got this like sling bikini and everything. And
Mhm,
it's just me being a sexy PlayStation 5 with my PlayStation 5 because I was just
mhm.
really excited.
Yes, and
And it
just so
was
you know,
quarantine, and what else you gonna do?
my wife said she would not wear an outfit like that, so that's off the table.
Oh,
That's a bummer, but,
I
um
mean, that one is mostly latex, and to be honest with you, it's not for everyone. You get real sweaty under there. Does not breathe. So I
Well,
feel that.
I'm curious, and I don't know if this is information you have about about your subscribers or people that buy photo sets from you, but do you see any difference in genders for people that buy your art?
It's primarily men. But I do have a lot of more queer leaning subscribers, and I'm always surprised at the amount of women or like
Mhm.
femme presenting people who aren't just necessarily other people in the industry, right? Because a lot of
Mhm.
people who also sell sexy content on the internet, like we all subscribe to each other and support each other, partially because it can be a tax write-off for like research,
Mm.
but also because you know, you're just interested in seeing what else you've got and spreading the love around, and especially because a lot of websites like Instagram and stuff, it's really easy to get kicked off of them if you do
Oh,
anything that's not super family friendly. You know, I have friends who are, you know, like mostly bikini models and things, right? Like not even like particularly provocative stuff as far as I am concerned, who are on their like third or fourth Instagram account because it's just so easy to get kicked off if you're not 100% family friendly at this point. Um, and it's interesting because you definitely see people, you know, the same sort of people who are like, oh, but sex sells and that's so easy, right? Don't realize that it's also like really difficult. You get shadow banned on everything. If you kind of don't already have a following, it's really, really hard to build one and to reach people just because of all of the censorship on social media apps, which is where people go. A lot of people, there was a point in time where there was kind of like a purge on Patreon where they kicked a whole bunch of the adult content creators on the website. And then the whole Tumblr thing, I don't know if you saw that a few years ago, right, where Tumblr just purged all of the adult content on the website. Things like that have been very difficult for sex workers and sex worker adjacent people. Sesta Fosta passing in the States definitely has had wide ranging effects on Facebook and Instagram and like all of these ways that people are now really primed to seek their content. It's a lot more difficult to get people to like a .com website that you own, even if it is more secure and safer for everyone involved than something like Patreon or OnlyFans.
yeah.
It's so much harder to get people there, and unfortunately, that like we're seeing a resurgence of the newsletter, which is like kind of fun because I like writing them. But it's also the only way that you can be kind of guaranteed that you're going to get through to a bunch of your fan base because of these shadow bans and things. So, you know, sex does sell, but also you have to go deal with all of this censorship that's
Yeah.
happening right now. And I do see that we're kind of in a conservative swing that way right now, it seems. And I do hope that we swing back the other way because history's pendulum
Yeah.
works like that. So we're in kind of a conservative swing with sex work. We see a bunch of like trans bans coming in the States and a lot of really worrying legislature there. So I'm hoping this is just kind of the apex of the pendulum swinging that way, and that we'll hopefully see it swing back the other way. And we just
Yeah.
have to hope that every time the pendulum swings, it swings a little further to the side that is, you know, human rights, trans rights, sex worker rights, and protections, right? You just kind of have to hope that every time it swings your way, it goes a little better and it can't get repealed the next time it swings back the
Yeah.
other way. But kind of the older I get, the more I see it come in waves
Yeah.
at this point, and it just happens that way.
It really does, and it has throughout most of history, really. But yeah, it's a frightening time to be a trans person, to be a queer person in the United States, you know, and we're all hoping things start to get better now. But yeah, it's scary, and you know, I have quite a few friends that do online sex work and run their OnlyFans. OnlyFans is going to be changing. They're going to be making it so now they own your content and they can do what they want. And you know, I know a lot of people that do in person sex work that because of the pandemic have had to turn to doing online sex work and try to
Mhm.
learn that as their business instead. And it's a challenge. There's a lot of people that rely on sex work and sex adjacent work, which is a term I love. Um, to provide for themselves and their families. And as a society, we are not making it easy for people. And
No,
I,
and we
yeah,
kind of never have. There
yeah,
have been pockets of human history where this whole thing has been acceptable, but definitely not in my lifetime or my parents' lifetime.
yeah,
There are very few places where sex work is truly like accepted and is
mhm,
is a good thing, even though it's obviously not going away. Right, this has been a constant in human history
well,
always, and it just kind of continues to floor me that people are still like, no, this is bad and we have to stop it, when if you have any view of history at all, as someone who was a fan of history and took elective history courses kind of just for the fun of it while I was in school, um, it's always been the thing. This is human nature. We really need to chill
mhm,
on it, and just make sure that people are protected. I think
yeah,
it's much more important as a society to make sure that people are protected and safe than it is to make sure that they're doing exactly what you want them to do.
yeah.
And
Well,
I
and
would hope that most
um,
people feel the same way, even if they don't necessarily agree with or would use the services of a sex worker.
and I think that you really hit on it there. That safety is key, and I think that unfortunately, though, the most people thing is to the negative. I think that you know when people are looking at people who do sex work, they're seeing them as only sexual objects, not as members of society. And so then when that same person who thinks that same way goes out on the street and sees someone who maybe does sex work or who they think does sex work, they want to treat them that same way, that this is a sexual object. And I use this sexual object for my gratification, and if I'm not able to, maybe I respond violently. And that's a terrifying thing.
And
um,
it's really the story of like almost every serial killer in history.
mm,
Well,
yeah,
right, like that is the MO, and sex workers have historically been the less dead,
yeah,
which is a term just saying like, like nobody missed them.
yeah,
And it's not true. And mostly, sex workers have been historically, in places where they're not, where sex work hasn't been allowed. Sex workers are historically on the receiving end of a lot of violence and a lot of hatred. And I think it's just, I think it's important for people who are kind of considering maybe getting into that it's sex sells, but it's not necessarily easy money. It's like the reason a lot of people decide to not come out or straight pass or pass as cis is because it is difficult. A lot of things are difficult about all of it. And a lot of people, that's not something that they're prepared to do, and you can't necessarily blame anyone for that,
no,
right? Like,
can't blame them at all.
I get
Not
it.
not at all. Well, aside from society, what is the climate like within the professional cosplay community, or within the sex work adjacent community for each other? I mean, is it a pretty good community? I mean, is there some optimism, or what's everybody thinking?
I think it's a mixed bag, kind of like everything. I think you get a fairly even kind of slice of all of the different parts of society, because I've definitely had like quite a few people like come for me, like, as the term is, right? Being like, "Oh, well, you just post your ass on the internet, right? Like it must be so easy." Kind of a thing. And I'm like, "It's not, because I have to deal with you." Like, this definitely isn't making me have a nice day. And then there were the people, there are plenty of people, I think, mostly sex work communities and cosplay communities are quite liberal with their ideas, because I kind of think you have to be, but there are definitely pockets that are quite puritanical, especially in the upcoming generation. Actually, there's a group younger than us, because I mean, I'm a
Really?
millennial. Yeah, there's kind of a group coming up that, in a lot of the like fan art cosplay communities, are referred to as aunties, with ANTI, not like auntie, like your aunt, right? who are like against like shipping characters, right? Which is like romanticizing characters together, who are against sexy
I'm not so
content.
old that I don't know what that means. Okay.
Well, I mean, not for you, but you know, there are people watching who maybe don't know, who've never heard of any of the fandom stuff. I figured you have a young one who's like kind of into cosplay. You've heard about shipping, like we all do it, except for the aunties. And it's definitely, there are I have some friends who are fan artists who have just been like accosted on the internet and had to like shut down social media accounts and things because they're just getting bombarded by these people who are so against sexual content. And it is 100% completely fine to not want sexual content in things that you consume. But it's very worrying to me that there is a group, that there are groups of people, and there are groups of young people specifically, who don't understand the difference between I do not wish to consume sexual content and no one is allowed to make sexual content. And there's just this very clear meshing of those two thoughts. Is like, since I don't want this thing, no one should make it, and anyone who makes it is bad. And because I am the heroine of my own story, obviously, because you think differently than me, you're bad. It's been a very interesting thing, and a little bit of a worrying thing to watch happening.
Wow. I had
Yeah,
no idea. I had no idea. Wow. I just say all
it's
my youngest are all, I mean, they're super hardcore into anime and games, and they're so liberal about everything, and it's gorgeous. I just didn't
I think
see that kind of thing.
a lot of people are. I think this is a very vocal minority, but it's still a minority that you kind of have to keep in mind, especially if you're going to be making content like this, because to a certain extent, like all of those things that we used to say back in the day, right, of like don't feed the trolls and don't get into that with people, they're still true. I think the internet has gotten both more liberal and a lot more restrictive in some ways. And in some cases that's very good. You know, internet security has become a much bigger thing than it used to be back in the day when I was first on the internet at like 16, which is great. But there are also a lot of ways that the internet has become a lot more dangerous, and you have to really be careful about what you're doing on the internet, because just like one bored person, it could just ruin your day, your life, and maybe your career. And that's been especially true during the pandemic, where people are just bored and lashing out because they're not getting assistance.
That's scary. And
It is.
yeah.
It can be really scary. You know, it's a fun job, and I love it, and I love what I do. And hopefully after the pandemic, I'll get to go back to making the characters kiss, which is like my favorite thing ever. But you know, there's a lot to be worried about, and you know, you can't let it control you like anything. You can't let that fear control you, because I would much rather regret having, you know, a bad interaction than regret not having done the thing that caused the interaction. You know, I would much rather regret how people interacted with me and be sad that I had to go through that, than I would regret like never having done that thing to
That makes
begin with,
sense.
right? Like never having done the
Yeah.
cosplay, never having done the photos, because I do have a great time doing it, and I really like it. You know, being on the internet recently, not so much, but
Well,
I really like making this stuff.
and that's what I wanted to ask. You know, it's we've been in the pandemic. That sucked for everybody. You know, we all know that. And you're in Ontario, which
We're still
apparently is
here.
really, really sucking right now. But you know, you're a great model. You're great with your cosplay design. You know, you're a professional cosplayer. Are you happy with where you are right now?
Yeah, I
Mm.
if I had have looked back on, you know, where I was even probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I would be really happy with where I am right now. Like if I had gone back to like 16-year-old me and like one of my first cosplays that like didn't fit very well and was terribly sewn, and it's this like cheap eBay wig that, looking back at photos of it, I really feel like I was probably wearing backwards. If I went back to that kid, oh yeah, I'll find you photos. I've got them somewhere. If I went back to that kid and was like, hey, you're gonna be doing this full time in the future, I just would have been like, that's sick. That's great. Like, even with a lot of the not great stuff, it's great. And it's great that we have these things as industries, and that people can do these things and be supported by other people, instead of, historically artists are always like, well, now you paint for the church, and that was kind of it, right? It's very nice to have
Wait,
gotten there.
I'm trying to picture the church is hiring you, and maybe there are a couple, probably there's some cool churches, but
one of the local satanic churches does follow me on one of my OnlyFans profiles. They're
nice.
great. Yeah, no,
do,
the Satanist church is really cool. They're
you could
cool
do
people.
a cool religious cosplay, whatever religion it is, and just pray you're not going to whatever hell they
I know. Well, I was raised incredibly, incredibly religious, which I don't get to talk about a whole lot, but I was raised really religious in a religion that I really strongly consider a cult now.
What religion?
My family were hardcore Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, damn it. I didn't know this. We could have spent today talking about a freaking cult instead of me just asking random questions.
Would you like to? We could just do a part 2. I'm not going anywhere.
We're gonna have to, everybody, I'm gonna put together a part 2. Don't worry, we're gonna hear about the cult that Bre grew up in. But sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
We'll talk a little bit about the religious cult, which is in a lot of sects. I can't necessarily say overall, because it is kind of a patchworky religion.
Did you say
in the
sex
way that
or sex?
Sects.
Okay. I was thinking.
SECT. Well, they do have a scandal going on where a lot of people are being sued in the UK right now about child sexual abuse.
Oh no, that's
not a thing that I ever encountered, but definitely a thing that the religion was well set up to allow. Okay. So it's kind of like Judaism and Scientology like had a baby. That's basically Jehovah's Witnessing. Like not the religious part of Judaism, but like how Scientology works.
Oh, dude, you're cracking me up, dude.
I've done a lot of reading about religion.
I'm gonna jot this down so I can use this zinger with my wife and pretend that I made it up.
just do it before this episode comes out. It'll be great. But yeah, no, they were pretty anti-LGBT, really anti-sex before marriage, against sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So, and look at me now.
Hell yeah. Well, before we go, do you want to pitch anything or plug anything you're working on?
I mean, hey, if you like sexy content, I'm literally always releasing stuff. I just never stop. So I tend to release like a couple 100 photos a month on poison.com, which is a subscription service. You can pay with like PayPal and whatever you want. It's pretty much all in there. And I also have an OnlyFans. Don't have a Patreon because they kicked me off, but it's why the website happened, and it's way more fun over there anyway because I can post literally whatever I want. So yeah, no, and I mean social media, I am on all of them. I will talk to you on all of them. I don't care. So yeah, it would be great.
Yeah, and I have to say, even if you're not going over there to subscribe, but I hope you will subscribe. Their website is fantastic, just gorgeous cosplay. Make sure you check it out, especially if you're into cosplay and don't just want to see sexy pics. I guess either way doesn't matter.
And then, I mean, the lowest, like one of the lower tiers on the website, there's like a $2 to $5 tier. The $5 is like mostly safe for work, like safe for work. There's no like outright nudity. There's sometimes like bikini photos, but that's about as racy as it gets. And I also do really in-depth tutorials on a lot of stuff that I do. So like this month I'm releasing some tutorials on wig wefting and cutting, because I did a couple of wigs that are like boy cut short, kind of like my regular hair, which is quite difficult to do. And I spent like a month ruining wigs, figuring out how to do it because I really wanted to do it. And like how to combine cheap wigs and make them look like a much more expensive wig if you have a lot of time but not a lot of money. And I've done write-ups on a bunch of how-to stuff with latex because it's a very difficult fabric to work with, and a lot of people don't know where to begin. So I have some resources for that as well, and things for subscribers. And I mean, if you know, time rich, money poor, I can also probably point you in the correct direction for people who do that sort of thing on YouTube and everything. Who
That's
aren't me.
awesome. Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to get my youngest connected on that tier where they can learn a little bit more about wigs. Not necessarily working with latex because I would be the one that has to do it, and I don't want to. But they would
That's
absolutely love the
fair.
wigs.
I
Latex,
don't know if you've ever done foam, but latex is like
no.
foam, but it stretches like spandex.
Oh God.
So it's the worst of all of those worlds. I used to teach people how to do it every now and then. We would do classes like back in the before COVID times. Sometimes I would do just like group classes, and honestly, I'm a mean person because literally every class someone would have to like go take a walk so that they didn't cry. And
Yes.
every time, because they
Yeah.
were just so frustrated, and every time I would just be like, yes, validation, it is difficult. Because I've been doing it for a long time. I'm just like, yep, and then you put the scene together like this, and you just do this, and there you go, there it's done. And then someone would try to recreate that for like half an hour, and I
Wow.
would just be like, yes, validation, my time has been worth something.
That's so awesome. Well, well, guys, if you want to see sexy, amazing cosplay pics, go to poison.com. If you want to learn more about creating cosplays, go to poison.com. The link is right there in the episode description. So it's going to be super easy to click. But that's kind of our time today, Bre. It was really great
Amazing.
chatting with you.
Yeah, it was great chatting. This was fun. We'll
Awesome.
talk
All right.
about cults next time.
Oh, yes. That's one of my favorites. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Rebecca Jonesy, our sponsor. Thank you so much for keeping the show going. I really appreciate it, especially during the pandemic here when I have not been able to work. It's great to not have to freak out about money. So I really do appreciate you, Rebecca. All right. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay strong.